Hello, and welcome to the Edgy Politics Podcast, the show that discusses African political affairs with the extra twist of covering not only African political issues, but also geopolitical affairs with a clear, progressive lens. I am your host, Geographical Queen. In today's episode, I will discuss the significance and confusion about democracy in Africa. I will be deliberating about the ins and outs of this topic and offer listeners a special surprise at the end. So, let's get to it. What is democracy in and for Africa? The idea of democracy being a one-size-fits-all form of governance in all countries is a bit cynical. First of all, should all countries be democratic? Further, if we are to go by the scam that America sold to us in the name of democracy, then democracy, as understood, means freedom of speech, freedom of voting, several political parties, financial freedom, and freedom of movement. But if we are to go beyond the buzzwords, what kind of democracy does America itself practice? In the United States, for example, there are two political parties, Democrats and Republicans, and period. In Germany, we have a union government. They call it the coalition government, which implies all hands on deck, a situation which doesn't make any politician desperate to win an election by all means, as seen in most African countries in their winner-take-all constitutions. In Russia, for example, they have a democratic federative form of government in which state power is divided among the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Note that several political parties are replaced with legislative, executive, and judicial branches. In all these countries mentioned, they all have one thing which all African countries don't have. That is financial freedom. This is the freedom that doesn't compel such countries to seek permission from the US through the use of their SWIFT financial system before they can transfer just a paltry amount of $10,000 from their bank accounts or receive, say, in our African concept, take any country in Africa and the procedure is the same. African countries are supposed to be democratic, but they have several political parties, freedom of speech, freedom of voting during general elections, and freedom of movement, etc., etc. But when it comes to financial freedom, there is none. A certain self-imposed headmaster of a global policeman created some institutions known as Moody, Fitch's, Standard & Poor. And these institutions control the African financial institutions like puppet masters. They wake up any day and decide they don't like a Mr. A or a Mr. B and take it upon themselves to punish nations. And how do they do it? They just degrade African countries' credit ratings, and overnight, a country is bankrupt. Based on what? Based on someone's individual decision from one of these countries. African countries have no right to operate their own banking systems. The banks have no choices but to open nostro accounts in US banks before they can have access to their own finances. Failure to inform Headmaster US about financial transactions, and the bank is kicked out of the SWIFT system as punishment. There is something called the National Cap, which is dictated by the US as to how much money a country is supposed to have as in transfers per day. So in reality, what was the benefit of democracy in Africa if all it meant was the people having a voice to insult political opposition party members willy-nilly, or vote every 4 years for a political party in something called general elections just for the fun of it, but financially stay imprisoned? Is this the essence of democracy? Can people survive, create, and develop their nations on financial hunger? Somebody should please help me understand this in its broadest terms. What is democracy in Africa if going by the American terms? And what are its benefits for the African countries? Most importantly, should all countries be democratic? Note that China and Russia, for example, are not democratic countries as sold to us by the US. They are supposed to be communist countries. But can we compare their progress to the United States? Well, give me your comments below, and thanks for tuning in. I will be back in the next broadcast. Good day.